Welcome to the Bitcoin tooling panel, Bitcoin script tooling. So let's go through introductions. I'm Dusty Damon, your moderator and naive script tool representative. So we got Say Zeus. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello. I'm Seth Zeus. I'm the CEO and co-founder of BitScript.
Do you want to introduce yourself, Topher?
Yeah, my name is Topher Scott. I am the CTO of BitEscrow, and I also freelance doing a bunch of open source stuff.
Cool. And in the end, Rob?
And I'm Rob Hamilton, co-founder and CEO of AnchorWatch.
Cool. So I think we should start with kind of some larger questions. Maybe not what Bitcoin script is, but who is Bitcoin script targeted at in your mind? Are we trying to target other developers, trying to target plebs? Let's start over here. How do you view it?
Yeah, so from our perspective, we built BitScript because we're trying to cross that chasm of people who want to get into Bitcoin, but don't necessarily understand the fundamentals behind it, right? And so one of those is obviously a big part is understanding how script works. And so from our perspective, it's mainly protocol developers that have to learn script, but even web developers that are jumping in and immediately using APIs, as they should for a temporary solution, they eventually need to understand what's happening underneath the hood. So protocol developers are the people that need to be aware and using script immediately, but I think we've all realized there's a big problem when web developers enter, but don't necessarily understand how transactions are formatted, how the stack works, etc.
So a big problem with web developers. What are you guys doing? Okay, but it sounds like you're talking about kind of bringing down a layer. So the more sophisticated developers, in terms of Bitcoin usage, already have to use this stuff, and you're trying to bring it down to like not that we're hating on web developers, but they usually just don't touch this stuff, and trying to make it easier for them to do that. Very cool. Topher, when you work on Bitcoin scripting tools, who are you targeting with the same kind of question?
You know, I really just want anybody to be able to work on Bitcoin script in the browser, because I feel like that's how you reach the most people. Unfortunately, that means you reach out to a lot of degens. But, you know, more developers in the space, I feel like, is a win. And so I'm just trying to make Bitcoin script more available to the masses, to where you can experiment with it, you can play around with it, and you don't necessarily need to set up Bitcoin core node and like do all this stuff to set up your environment. You can just go. And I feel like we already have a lot of cool tools for broadcasting transactions from the web. It's just putting those transactions together that I found, like, during my time, that some of the tooling was lacking, especially around Taproot. So I made a TapScript library for doing Taproot transactions in the browser. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing for me. I use it all the time for my stuff, and a lot of other people use it for their own things as well. So
very cool. Yeah, I've seen there's very little to no TapScript stuff out there.
No.
Have you done any of the advanced stuff, like the threshold signatures or anything like that?
I'm working on doing Frost, like bringing Frost to the masses. I have a library for doing Musig. So I'm trying to complete the circle. So you have a TapScript library, you have a Musig library, and then I feel like Frost is the final component, because then you can kind of take full advantage of what Taproot brings you, is not only being able to do scriptless scripts, but being able to do scripts that are within a tree. Yeah.
Cool, very frontier stuff. I love it. Yeah. And Rob, when you work on Bitcoin scripting stuff, like, who do you envision as your target demographic?
So ultimately, for like my primary uses day to day, it's application devs, or what I'm thinking about. Yeah. Our buddy Rindell says that end users should never hear something like Bitcoin script, like the person who's like holding the money, but developers should be enabled in such a way where they can spend more time building better products and solutions and not trying to kind of navigate the maze that is Bitcoin script. And for me, I think like the line for enablement upstream, like to the end consumer, is the philosophy I have is that users should have like the knowledge and consent if they so choose to go down that path. Right. No one knows, like, you know, not every person who has a driver's license knows how a car works, right? You don't need to understand every single piece of mechanic. You want to understand that the system as a whole is going to function the way you intend it to. And if you so choose, the beauty of Bitcoin is that you should be able to dig into it, audit it, and verify yourself, right? Don't trust, verify. So from a script tooling, accelerating application development, like I think Taproot's a great example where it all technically functions and can exist, but for mass adoption of these tools, there needs to be better acceleration for enabling those application devs to be able to get these more powerful tools into the end hand of customers.
Cool. It sounds like you're targeting application developers, but you want plebs to be able to do it. Kind of like you can pop up on your own hood, fix your own car kind of thing.
Yeah, and people can write tutorials and be like, this is how you do it if you so choose. You can do like infographics, like breaking things down, right? But ultimately, like the application dev is the best force multiplier in getting this more advanced scripting tooling to the masses.
Cool. I like that example because it gives, it's like the car owner should be able to change their oil, should be able to like do those very basic things, but you shouldn't expect them to build the engine from scratch or anything like
Exactly.
that. Yeah, I like that analysis.
Yeah.
I'm just curious in the room, who here is a developer? Raise your hand. Who here is a web developer?
Hell yeah.
That I may have even sold it earlier. Sorry. Okay.
All sitting in the back
Randy.
row.
Great. So you guys are mostly the target demographic then. Okay. So let's start in the other order because I started with you last time. Rob, so what sort of tooling are you building specifically for these application developers? What are you most excited about, and what are you working on these?
Yeah, so for the tooling and stuff that we're working on, I mean, the immediate, like a great example of like an enablement tool is something like Bitcoin Dev Kit, where it's built on top of Rust Bitcoin and Rust Mini Script, where you have this very robust Swiss Army knife that can let you build out a full-fledged wallet like we have. There's incremental user accessibility and dev accessibility tools, such as when you're constructing a PSBT, I mentioned this earlier in my talk, if you're using something like Miniscript and there's multiple ways that you can execute a branch, you need to construct custom witnesses to be able to choose which branch you're executing on. And it's very functional, but it's not quite intuitive in how you have to parse through policies to understand how you're going to execute certain branches. So enabling better automation and kind of understanding around that. A really fun example, it's fully open source, the Bitcoin dev team put out BDK Elephant, where you basically have checkboxes, like, oh, I want to spend the 2 of 3 path, not the 7 of 5 path, 5 of 7, whatever path, right? You can check, like, I'm going to satisfy this time lock and do that. And that handles all of those complexities in a really clean abstraction for end users. But again, you have to then communicate that to the end user too, which is tedious, right? The idea that there's multiple ways that you could spend a UTXO, you don't have this discrete, I have 2 of 3, you now need to start considering how do you communicate that to the end user, especially because it can impact fee rates, right? If you're using different scripts and different paths, right? So this all has to kind of like holistically get bundled together. And the other one I would just throw on top of that is PSBT tooling. I'm a big fan of using BIP 174 for quick like throwing stuff together, but there's a lot more that could be done for kind of really cleanly showing you like, yes, you have this massive base 64 string, what the heck's going on here? And I think the BIP 174 is like a great starting point for like better visualizing that, and that helps devs do QA and troubleshooting, and it also helps end users being like, okay, what is this block of text? Like, what is it supposed to be doing? Your hardware wallet usually checks that, but it doesn't hurt to look at it yourself too and have better empowerment and knowledge for this data that you're transferring around.
Cool. Who here has used a PSBT before? Okay, so you guys, we got some, but not very many. So you guys are definitely the audience for this. So Topher, the same question to you. Like, what sort of tooling are you focused on building for scriptwriters, like more in detail?
So I have like a whole suite of tools that I built for BitEscrow that are just general purpose open source tools. So I'll just go down the list. In addition to TabScript, one of them is like a signing device library that just gives you primitives that you need to do all the things you need to do with your key. In addition to signing Bitcoin transactions, you might want to use that same key to sign a Nostr message or to do something else. So just a signing device that's very easy to use. It gives you the primitives that you need to do, like maybe your own protocols on top of Bitcoin. Also, there's another tool that I'm working on called Core Command, which is essentially like a wrapper that interfaces with the Bitcoin D binary, and just basically you use it as a testing tool. You can just like run all your transactions, all your scripts, everything, you just straight through the binary just to use it as a validator. And that's been incredibly useful just for doing like CI/CD stuff, where I just don't have to have like this complicated setup that has to spin up for doing testing. It's literally just executing my scripts through a binary. Oh, Bitcoin Core liked it. Oh, I got a transaction ID out of it. Okay, we're good. So like removing as much friction as possible so that you can just like build really cool transactions with custom scripts and then be able to validate them right away and be able to then just go from there, just like, I don't know, build whatever you want at that point. So those have been like the two pain points that I've seen is like being able to write scripts as easily as possible, as frictionless as possible, and then being able to test and validate them.
Right.
So.
Cool. Who here uses CI for their development work? Okay, some. You guys got to do more testing. Okay. I also want to jump back. I was saying who uses PSBT. Who knows what PSBT is? So maybe we should. Most people. Okay. For the few that don't, it's basically a bundle of a transaction that's not signed yet. I think it's called like pre-signed,
partially
signed
Bitcoin transaction PSBT. So we're talking about. They're talking about building these complicated transactions, and you want to pass them around between things.
I always call a PSBT basically if you took a paper check and you had everything filled out but the signature line.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're just like, this is where I'm sending funds from. This is where I'm sending them to. Now I'm just going to aggregate my signatures. And what's really nice about that is you can present a PSBT to Core or a lot of other Bitcoin software, and it will do what's called finalize, and it'll arrange all the data so it's a network valid transaction, and it abstracts that all away so you don't have to worry about individually constructing the elements of your witness into the script and getting a good transaction.
Cool. And the same question to you, what sort of tooling are you building that you're excited about for script writers?
Yeah, so we're definitely focused on Taproot and TapScript as well. We think that as exciting as Cat, CTV, and what people are talking about here, I think Taproot and TapScript, the potential has been maybe 5% explored, 10% at most. So I think there's still so much to be done there. But I think we're trying to do things a little bit differently here because we're thinking of not necessarily pushing the edge at the moment, but onboarding the next 1,000 developers. So the answer to you is, we're just trying to do really simple things really well. So in our perspective, like there's design and UI that's missing around a lot of these tools, which the GigaBrains can immediately grok, but the next 1,000 developers certainly can't. And so our goal is just beautiful tools doing the simple things well.
Cool. So we got a good spread of stuff here. So we covered this a bit, but I have on my list. So I want to ask this question more specifically. Who is the specific audience for the stuff you just described?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a cop-out to say all Bitcoin developers. So I'll say, again, I think when we started working on BitScript, which we definitely built because a lot of these tools we couldn't find ourselves, and so we started rolling them and started creating UIs around them, we kind of realized that, there's probably 100 to 200, maybe 300 developers who are aware of what script is and know how to work with it, but thousands that are trying to get into that space at the moment.
So is a piece of it like education then?
Yeah. So ours is definitely a lot more educational focused at the beginning, but we do have like a script sandbox, a deserializer, and like more advanced tools. But I think our goal is the onboarding of developers, getting them from what is Bitcoin, I like it, I want to get more into it, to okay, cool, this is what script is.
So you want to be the gateway drug.
Gateway drug. It sounds like you're trying to get developers that are like kind of biting their teeth to like kind of just learn. I looked on your site. There's a bunch of cool like examples you can go through manually and build them yourself, kind of thing.
Right.
So you're saying getting people on to actually building some scripts themselves and getting a sense of it. And then Topher, how would you describe your ideal audience for the tools you're building?
So I think about this every time I'm working on a project or building something. So my specific audience is Super Testnet. Show of hands, how many people know who Super Testnet is? Right. So I feel like that's a good example because half the crazy shit that he builds is using tools that I helped build for him. And he's a kind of energy where he has an idea, he wants to prototype it right away, he wants as little friction as possible, so he just wants to build it. And I feel like that's what tooling really needs to do. It needs to eliminate that friction so people that have that imagination, they just go out and build it.
Nice.
And so he was able to, not a lot of people know about this, but BitVM was built on TapScript.
Oh.
So, so I feel like, would have that been possible with Bitcoin.js? Would have that been possible with another library? Probably, maybe. But I feel like even we can do better than that. Like we can make it so that building and prototyping on Bitcoin is so effortless that like you will see all sorts of cool new projects.
So you're kind of the man behind the man. You're enabling the frontier exploration of new ideas from people like Super and perhaps other supers. You could all be a super maybe if you Well, it's a lot. It's challenging to be like Super, but he's amazing.
And I want to give a shout out to Paul Miller, who does the Noble Library. Show of hands who knows who Paul Miller is. Yeah, that's another like man behind the man.
Yeah.
Like he does a lot of great work that enables people, again, in the browser, in the degen space, to be able to like build more powerful things.
Cool. And Rob, who would you describe your audience as?
I mean, it ultimately comes from where we're hitting friction points for ourselves, right? If we're realizing that, like, if so many things could just are sequentially able to be done in an automated fashion on our end, and the moment we hit a point of friction of like, okay, how do we automate this piece? How do we abstract away the complexity and have certainty that we're executing things correctly? So ultimately, it just comes down to anyone who's just in that the nitty gritty. Specifically, a lot of the stuff I'm working on is with Miniscript, and then that would really be just kind of that holistic experience of when you're doing arbitrary scripts, kind of expediting all of the automated elements that you want to understand, the witnesses, the fees. I think one thing I've been wanting to do for a while is kind of a better way or like an updated way of doing like the policy visualization of all the nested conditions and understanding how you're sequentially going through all of that. I think the bit script stuff is a really great way too. To be like, okay, so you have like this abstract diagram idea. Okay, this is what it looks like on stack now. And what you can do, I think would be really powerful is being able to show like, if you do this, this is how the script executes. If you pick branch B, then you get this, right? And I think it just kind of really holistically ties in for however deep you want to go. If you just want to click the button, send, sign, and be done, you're good. But as you're wanting to get more granular, that you get visualizations that kind of pop out are really powerful.
Cool. So it sounds like you're building it for production for your own work,
Yeah.
and so you're kind of building tools other people doing in production would find useful. Is that
Yeah.
a fair summary?
Yeah.
Can you remember any big challenges you had building that, like hard points that?
Hard points around building that. I mean, for us, and this is thankfully something that's kind of getting wrapped up soon, was just, you could naively just by default run everything in memory, like for like loading a lot of descriptors and wallets within BDK, just having more robust resiliency for like network architecture. BDK is just wrapping up right now, ability to migrate out to Postgres, so you can just like dump all that data into DB. So just being able to, you have like semantically like, oh, I can execute the script, I can spend, I can sign, I can do all these things, but it's like, okay, building a production enterprise system, making sure that you have redundancies, multiple regions, that you're able to automatically park those into databases, and those are kind of like connectors that are going to take that last mile. So those are the things that pain points relative to, in the scope of everything else, has been really straightforward. Those are like that last mile things for production ready.
Right, the kind of like low glory, high work thing you got to do to get it
Right.
done. Yeah.
The dirty work.
You don't want to have it be, so if the server turns off, how do you restore the wallets? Right, so you have to like
Oh,
disaster
God.
recovery and everything, right? So you can't just assume always on. So just having those resiliencies in place, or
Yeah.
like it's the last mile and it's not glorious, but it's all required work to kind of make sure everything's strong and steady.
What about like getting hardware wallets on board with stuff? Has that been a challenge or been easy?
Thankfully, I think that battle's largely been won at this point. The only major one left that isn't doing the Miniscript stuff is Trezor, and I politely asked Slush at Honey Badger last year, and it's not immediately going to happen, but Salvatore really pushed the way through with Ledger, and then I cyber-bullied and in-person bullied NVK for like 9 months until he finally turned it on, and it's now live. I love it on the queue. You have that big screen. You can look through all of those different spending conditions. Now, at this point, it's really in the hands of the application devs to take it home, because you have Ledger, Bitbox, Spectre DIY, Cold Card, MK4, the Tap Signer, and then the Blockstream Jade. Like, you have enough now. There's enough of a robust, diverse ecosystem to be able to start working on that. But that definitely was, when I first started working, there was only the Ledger and the Spectre DIY. So we've gotten 4 wallets in the past year. So now we've hit a critical mass of feeling comfortable and good about that.
Cool. All right. What are the challenges of being the man behind Super?
What are the challenges? Well, he absolutely refuses to run a server for anything. And it all has to fit in one index HTML file. So
Web devs are infuriated.
Wow.
Yeah, so it has to be something that runs in the browser, that can be bundled in the browser. And so you have to have minimal dependencies. yeah, it's and he has like a very peculiar way that he likes to code. So you have to make sure that like the API, the interface is very easy to use. But I mean that's perfect because that's exactly what you want. You want that kind of feedback so you know that, oh, I'm building this wrong, because even if it works, if it's esoteric to use and nobody knows how to use it, then you failed. So yeah, so it's a challenge, but like his vision is where essentially anything and everything can run in the browser. The browser's kind of like this frontier of peer-to-peer where we can sort of like run all these applications and maybe using WebSockets or something connect to each other and not have to run a server. Just have like all these peer-to-peer protocols that we can bootstrap just from a browser window. And so it's immediately accessible to almost anyone and everyone in the world because everybody has a phone that can open up a browser tab. So it's a big challenge because it's like there's different browsers. Some browsers have different standards for like the cryptography library and what primitives are available. And like there's backwards compatibility and all this stuff. And so he doesn't want to deal with any of that. And no front-end dev really should. It should just work across all platforms, no problem. And yeah, so I guess like that's part of the dirty work is like trying to figure out, okay, how do you figure out all those edge cases where something doesn't work, and how do you make something that works across all browsers, all different ways you want to use JavaScript, because JavaScript has a lot of different, this is a lot of technical debt. There's like a lot of different ways you can use JavaScript. And it's a challenge, but it's worth it because it reaches the most people in the world. And so I think it's worthwhile. The pain is worth it.
I like it. I like it. It's like diamonds are made by hard pressure, right?
Yeah.
Something good. Who here thinks JavaScript's a very clean language? Good. Right answer. Oh, we got one? Oh.
There you go.
Okay, TypeScript is a fair exception. It's a fair exception. Build system? Oh, the TypeScript build system apparently is bad. If you guys want to fight it out in the back, he's...
It's fighting words.
Okay, so what are some of the challenges you've had in your onboarding stuff?
I gotta say, I'm loving that. Like, I have the 180 complete problems different than Topher has, right? Because you're building or designing for someone who knows exactly what they want and how they want it, and I have to put myself in the shoes of someone who only knows that they're sort of interested in Bitcoin.
Or you have it worse because you have to make it look good.
No index.html. Well, that's his problem, not mine. But yes. I would say putting myself in the position of someone who is excited, passionate about Bitcoin, and has web experience, and not taking any assumptions there. Working from zero knowledge, trying to like put myself in their shoes, and building the blocks all the way up. And yes, designing it well along the way. But yeah, very, very different, complete different audiences that we're building for, and it's a really interesting dynamic here.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear from the audience, like who feels like they'd be more on like the first time doing this kind of stuff? They'd be using more like this tool? Oh, people have been honest, nice. And who feels more like they identify a super test net, they'd be using the middle tool? You can answer both answers, by the way.
There's only one super test now.
And who'd be using more production stuff, like we have over here on Rob's side? Got a couple? All right. Cool. I feel like everyone will kind of, I imagine people would migrate, down all these paths as time goes on. Okay.
I think it's going to go here, and then production, and then eventually about enough production, you become a super test.
Oh, there we go.
Once you
just say to hell with it all.
Super testnet, yeah, it's production and then testnet, super testnet.
There we go.
Testnet, production, super testnet. That's the rank
There
order.
you go.
I love it. Okay. Do you have any success stories so far with this, or is it just getting started? I mean, do you have any users?
Yeah, I mean, we have users, we have revenue, which is rare for a Bitcoin company this early, but yes. We have revenue, yes.
A company with revenue in Bitcoin.
Yes. But I would say what I'm probably most proud of is we've helped a couple non-technical business developers at Bitcoin companies who actually have subscribed for the platform because they just wanted to sharpen their communication with their own engineers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so to me, that was a really unexpected use case, and it was really rewarding to see because, it showed that there's not only interest from the engineers here, but also from the people, from the marketers who, know the buzzwords and hear about them all the time, but want to also understand what it is happening underneath the hood. So we haven't, there's no super testnet that's come out of BitScript yet, but I would say those little wins of people just sharpening their communications with their engineers is...
That's super cool.
Yeah, it's been cool.
Do you have any success stories, or you have a favorite success story or two?
Well, besides like the BitVM stuff and whatever degen stuff might be happening with ordinals and inscriptions and runes, I feel like personally my success story is that I can just hit yarn test and my entire code base gets exercised. All the different transactions that I could produce get produced, and I get transaction IDs for all of them, and it all happens in GitHub Actions, and it all happens in a matter of seconds.
Wow. Like your CI goes through in seconds?
Yes.
So jealous.
Time to start writing in JavaScript.
If I get in a couple hours, I'm happy. Rob, do you have any success stories?
I mean, success stories when it comes to like developer tooling, I mean, we're going to be launching in about 6 to 8 weeks, like standing up an entire end-to-end fully functional wallet using this more advanced scripting functionality. Like, I consider that an achievement of our very small team being able to kind of kick that off. Overall, I think success from a narrative sense, kind of cyberbullying a bunch of people into using Miniscript and
it was amazing
and thinking
to watch,
about it. Yeah, it was a whole like forced meme for like a year of just like taunting people, and it's been really cool seeing, I think, the ecosystem starting to come around and realizing that we could be using it for more. That's it's more of a meta narrative story than a technical one, but definitely the technical achievement being standing up everything we have.
Yeah, that was awesome. He just like very, very politely, like only Rob can do. He just bullied all the hardware wallets into supporting this stuff. It's amazing. It just made Twitter entertaining for a month.
It was me and Kevin at Wizard Sardine were like tag team wrestling, just going into when Miniscript, just like going through everything. Yeah,
it's freaking great. Okay, so this is sort of a generalized question. We'll go from this side to change it up. What do you think that the status of adoption of BitcoinScript is with the developers that could or should be using it today? And what do you think the trajectory of that is? How are we improving as fast as we should? How much do we have as a percentage, do you think?
I mean, how much do we have as a percentage? Very hard for me to answer that. But I mean, that's the exact problem we're here to address, right? So hopefully the trajectory is changing with us in the game.
So more better.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense? I mean, is it just super that's your demographic, or do you have a sense of how many people are using BitcoinScript that should be today? Is it very few? Is it a lot?
I mean, outside of ordinals and runes, I'm not sure. But if you've ever been in the Orda chat on Discord, there's like 10,000 people in there that are trying to figure out how to use BitcoinScript.
Wow.
And yeah, hopefully a few of those like become like true believers and they actually build something meaningful, hopefully. But I think there's a lot of devs out there that are playing around with BitcoinScript and getting introduced to sort of like what the challenges are, but then what they can do with it. And hopefully with the Taproot stuff, Taproot does like allow you to do a lot of really cool things in a small package on chain. And so, and also with the BitVM stuff, I'm like hoping that that's like bringing more people in to want to experiment with BitcoinScript. Not just to build things you can build today, but maybe even getting them interested in like building stuff on the test chains with like some of the new opcodes that are going online. So outside of like the ordinal degens, I'm not sure, but I feel like overall like there just seems to be more of an excitement just around Bitcoin in general and Bitcoin development in general, and a lot more experimentations happening right now with BitcoinScript, which is exciting to see.
Cool. Rob, do you have an opinion on adoption?
I think the momentum is in the right direction. Like I feel acceleration. Like I wish it was faster. Like, but I think in a general sense, compared to year over year, like a lot more attention's going to this. A lot more is kind of being pushed forward and understanding kind of like the frontiers of what can be done within consensus, and then stepping outside, talking about like what is the next big like project and things to be working on for future consensus upgrades. I think those are all like it's trending in the right direction for sure.
Cool. Okay. I think I keep starting with these two ones. I'll start with you, Topher. What's the next big thing in BitcoinScript tooling? Like, what is the thing that doesn't exist yet that like should exist and might improve stuff?
So I was listening to a Twitter Spaces this morning for the OpTech newsletter.
Oh, nice.
And Merch was on there, of course. And he was talking about how Bitcoin really needs developers to go onto these test chains and start testing these new proposals for these new opcodes, and also benchmarking. So I feel like maybe that's what we really need, is we need better tooling for benchmarking scripts. Because especially if you're dealing with new opcodes, you don't know what the edge cases are that can bring down a node. That's kind of like a worst case scenario. You find an attack vector that can bring down a node. So yeah, I would say like definitely more tooling for that, so that it doesn't seem so scary to introduce new concepts that would require a soft fork.
Cool. Do either of you guys have an answer on the tip of your tongue? What else do you wish?
Yeah, I think if you combine something like Barack's script wizard, like a whole like IDE like coding environment, and you combined it with, I think, something like BitScript, like with better visualization of all of that and kind of showing how they all interrelate with each other, it allows you to better reason and understand that stuff. I think that would be just one thing that comes to mind, and then you can start kind of messing around and be like, what if I make it this, or if I do that, right? And you can start seeing like fail or this or that, right? I think those are, like I think from an application development layer, like just being able to quickly like spin up, visualize all that stuff. Actually, I saw TapSim. Johan from NIDIG has TapSim, which does TapScript. And I only found it out when I got here. In the command line, it actually does full like script emulation of the stack and the alt stack and the witness for everything in TapScript. And it just does it in command line, and it prints it out, and you can hit like the arrows, and you can keep going through the execution.
Wow.
And it's really cool. And he also has check contract verify for Matt stuff, and he has CTV in there, so you can also do like other experimental things in there. And that's really, those are big pieces. And just as I'm thinking about it walking in, upstream of like, upstream of like actually running the script is like running the environment. And I think of things like MutinyNet. I see Ben walking in, like that actually is like, so since Jameson is, as he calls it, tickling testnet right now and just totally breaking the network, I moved everything over to Signet like a week before that started happening. And now I am frustrated with my 0.1 Signet Bitcoin. I would love to have more. And so I'm going to start bussing tables so I can build up for some MutinyNet coins. Because getting that whole end-to-end stack of being able to deploy your own Signet, being able to run your tests and spin things up and do different environments, those are all things that are really important, especially now that testnet is going through block storms and time warp attacks simultaneously. Like, you want to have a reliable network to be able to spin up and test things. And that also could be part of your CIs as well. You're automatically deploying, you're broadcasting, you're checking everything, you're kind of bundling it all in. It's kind of a requirement if you're going to be doing like enterprise production software.
You ruined one of my future questions. Is testnet terrible or is it awful? Do you have any thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean,
what you'd like to see?
Again, I said it before earlier, and definitely giving away some of our roadmap now. But I think TapScript is completely not unexplored, but the potential has not been reached. So on our end, we're thinking of how do you simplify and make an interface that almost has like a drag and drop for different scripts that you'd want to put. You see the tree being built up, and then allowing users to turn that into an API endpoint so that they can plug that into apps directly. So again, on our end, we want to do the simple things well, and we think there's still so much to do with Taproot and TapScript that hasn't been explored.
Okay. Cool. So I just got one more question to Rob. How do you think miniscript will hold up against macro scripts?
It's really exciting that we're just so much script innovation is happening right now that they realized that it's better if you just make it bigger. So you just make it macro script, and then you solve all of the problems. And I think it's a really exciting development.
There you go. You heard it here first, folks. Macro script bigger than mini scripts. I wanted to open it up to the audience. Are there any questions that we have from the audience? Who here is going on this site and start learning how to do script stuff after this? Okay, cool. Who here is going to become super and start using some of these advanced tools to experiment? Yes. And
Should be an overlap, right?
Yeah, you can answer both questions. Who has used miniscript? Nice. Who wants to start using miniscript? Oh, nice. Okay. Do we have any questions from the audience? Anything we want to talk about? Anything else you guys want to talk about?
I think it would be amazing to see more visualization tools.
Hell yeah.
So you can better understand what you're actually doing. And I mean, outside of that, I feel like that's the pipeline. Like if web devs have nice tools with good interfaces and good visualization so they can be introduced to the concepts in a very easy, hand-holdy way, then they graduate to becoming application devs that are like writing the really heavy-hitting
Should
stuff.
that be integrated with a whole IDE, or should these be separated tools?
You answer that one. I think that's what you have in your back
Yeah,
pocket.
no, that's exactly our play, and that's why we're focused on getting that next 1,000 developers and building the environment for them so that they go through the pipeline of graduating to production and then et cetera.
Okay, so the IDE would be for building Bitcoin scripts themselves?
Yeah.
And then they'd pull off whatever was created into their application at some point?
Yeah, right now it's more so mainly educational, but there is going to be an API part that we add to it that's going to allow users to do things with the UI that then turns into API endpoints. And so at that point, it'll be more also for applications than just educational.
API points on like your server or for their own server? Or?
For their own server.
Oh, okay.
But from what they're building on our platform.
Okay, so they'd build scripts in your IDE, and then they'd be able to then export an API on their server to manage that kind of stuff.
More so for the taproot part, because
Okay.
because our thinking there is, again, you want to create your own tree, little drag and drop interface. Each node or each tap leaf is like a different script, and then obviously from that UI you could export that script path. But we think the more interesting use cases, again, developers that want to make a custom script path, but then reuse it inside of their app because they're building maybe like a TapScript wallet or something like that. And so being able to make the UI, handhold them through what they're creating, but then actually help them use that in their apps is where we want to cross the bridge eventually.
Okay, cool. Who here knows what a TapScript leaf is? Oh, wow, most
Hell yeah.
people. Do you want to describe it a little bit in high-level terms to the ones that didn't raise their hands?
Sure. So for people that aren't familiar with Taproot or TapScript, one of the best parts, or one of the key parts of it is the fact that you can have either one key that is spending directly, or that you can have a entire Merkle tree of different scripts that you can spend. And so say, for example, we wanted to build like a family vault where your wife could spend the money, or your kids could spend the money after 18 years, or maybe another path, your mom and your dad using a multi-sig can spend that money. And so being able to make that within the UI, and then again, let's say someone comes along and they're like, hey, I actually want to build a wallet for estate management. They can then turn what they built in the platform API endpoint and then hooks into their wallet.
Cool. Any more questions? I think we're running low on time, so I'm just going to speed this up. Do you want to say your names again for the final outro? Rob, do you want to start?
Yep. Rob Hamilton, co-founder and CEO of AnchorWatch.
Yeah. Topher Scott, CTO of BitEscrow.
Seth Zeus, CEO and founder of bitscript.app.
Nice. And I'm Dusty. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great rest of your conference.